No, that's been the answer for years, as your big ideas got scuttled by decision makers worried about the risk. The innovator's dilemma, the tendency to avoid taking chances in return for the relative safety of the status quo. That's now changing thanks to data technologies.
The future is here already. It's just not evenly distributed. Yet. Today's world teems with innovation. The nexus of hardware, software, and human ingenuity promises a revolution in possibilities. What does tomorrow look like? Witness Future Proof.
It's your host here, Eric Kavanagh, and I'm so excited today, folks, to focus on such a fun topic. I'll give you a backstory first. We're going to hear from a couple of experts today. My good time buddy, longtime buddy, Malcolm Chisholm, is dialing in today. He was on the show many years ago, still kicking, doing cool things in the world of master data and governance and catalogs and all that fun stuff, and a classic analyst on the Briefing Room series. And Vinayak Dave is going to join us. He's a first-timer, but also an evangelist in the tech space, and we're going to talk about this awesome concept of no excuses. So I was on a show with Nir Livna, the CEO of a company called Equalum. They're our sponsor today, so big thanks to those folks. A while ago, a couple months ago, and we were talking about what is this engine really, this data platform? It's a data integration platform they've built. What is it really? And he joked that it's an excuse cleaning engine. I almost fell off my chair laughing because I thought that was about the funniest thing I've heard in a long time. I'm still laughing about it because it's just funny. And what he was talking about is that a lot of times companies will not engage in new activities and new programs out of fear that they're going to break something, out of fear that some production system is going to be impacted negatively. And it's a very sincere concern. Sometimes when that happens, it can be really damaging financially, reputationally, et cetera. So you always want things to work properly. And when they don't, that's a problem. But what happens is people get good ideas and they want to change the business. They want to optimize some workflow, for example. They want to change the business in some way that they understand or believe is going to really help either get better product or get product faster or get better customers or whatever, some optimization to the business. But when they put forth that idea to the IT team or to someone in charge of operations, the answer is no. Sorry, we're not going to do that. There's no way. It's too risky. You're going to break the system. We're going to lose clients. And no doubt, bad things do happen sometimes when you change a production system. And a lot of these systems have been around for a long time too. So they weren't really designed with modern capabilities in mind. And let's face it, in the last 5 years or so, we have seen so much change in how information systems can be built. And the key word there is scale. You need scale out architectures to be able to handle the scale out capacity necessary to do business in the world today. And if you don't have that, you're going to run into real problems. Malcolm oftentimes is calling in from Florida. And I know down in Florida, when the pandemic hit, their unemployment system was just hit with a barrage of requests and it just crashed and burned. It did not work very well. And the reason is because it's an older system. They have not scaled out that architecture. They have not refactored it, is one way to describe it. But so Equalum is a company that does this data integration platform. So they talk about things like CDC, that stands for Change Data Capture, and they talk about how they can use this integration platform to basically dissolve excuses. Because if you can replicate the data in a very efficient manner and solve that problem, solve for that challenge of not wanting to break something, well, that answers your concerns. And that was Nir's joke, that it's an excuse cleaning engine, which again, it's just, that's never going to not crack me up. I think that's so funny. And a lot of the people who build these technologies, they come from places where they were using all of the existing technologies at the time, and they see the gap. They see what needs to be built to fix that hole. And that's what happens. That's where a lot of these data management companies come from, are people who either worked at other vendors or who were working as consultants or perhaps client side somewhere. And they saw that there's a problem here. We have to fix this problem. And they couldn't get the authority or the money or the budget, whatever, to get it done. Well, that's all changing these days thanks to this whole new generation of data platform technologies that are on the market now. And with that, let's bring in my buddy Malcolm Chisholm. Data Millennium is a pretty cool little concept you're throwing out there. Malcolm, tell us a bit about yourself and your understanding of data platforms and how things are changing.
So my name's Malcolm Chisholm. And I've been doing work in data for more years than I care to remember. So I'm originally from the UK, but I moved long ago to the US. I came up through the IT route. I was a developer, first an application developer, then a product developer. Then I kind of got more interested in data through database design and metadata management and master data management. And then kind of went more onto the strategy route with, looking at data governance when that came forth around 2005. And I think it's been, it's been exciting since to live in, I think, which today is the golden age of data. Long ago, data was just the byproduct of automation. It's the exhaust that came out of the back end of applications, but today it's the world's most valuable resource. So I think, we see a tremendous sort of growth in all of the facets that are needed for data management, data governance. And I think, something I'd like to riff on from what you said, Eric, is that if you think about it, and this has been a concern for me, if you think about it, we've had, 70 years. I mean, how long is it since 1964 when the IBM Series 3s were introduced? Say 70 years of organic growth in the architecture of IT. It kind of reminds me, a few years ago, I went to Honduras to the Mayan ruins in Copan. And what the Mayans did was they built temples. They started with a small one, and then they built a new one over the top of it, and a new one over the top of that, and a new one over the top of that. And you can actually walk through these different levels. Actually, there's like tunnels that go inside, and you can see all of them. And that's kind of what we've had with IT. So we've got a highly sclerotized architecture, and my personal worry is it's so sclerotized that when there's any change that's needed, it can't be done because it'll break something or drive, your current operational processes will stop. So how do we escape from that? Because change is a factor, as you pointed out. Scale's a big factor. That's part of change. Yeah. How do we do that? So I think this idea of the data platforms is going to change that. So that's something, I think we should explore. I'd like to hear Vinayak and your opinions on that. But for me, it's coming from this, like, you've got this huge problem that we built up over time just through organic, unplanned growth, and it's going to have to be dealt with, or our businesses will eventually grind to a halt. IT will prevent them from evolving.
Yeah, and what do you think about this concept of data platforms now being robust enough to handle the scale of today's needs? And really, I think the key is this layer of abstraction, meaning where you're making certain changes, it does not change the production system. It's just changing in the marshaling area so that you can then target the systems where you want it to go. And the general idea here is that by creating this layer of abstraction, you greatly mitigate the potential damage that could be done. What do you think about that, Malcolm?
I think that's what you need. You need some kind of cushion, some kind of insulation, because if you try to, mess with those systems, and in many cases you just can't, per se, you are going to break them. So I think having the abstraction layer. I mean, I've always been a fan of abstraction layers over databases, anyway, to insulate, change. I think that's probably the only way you're going to do this. I mean, I can't see anything else.
Yeah, well, let's bring in Vinayak, Dave from Equalum, formerly of Click as well, and Attunity, which is another vendor in this space. But Vinayak, obviously, you saw the vision over there at Equalum. Tell us a bit about yourself, your past in the industry, and where you see data platforms and data integration platforms taking us in the next few years.
Yeah. So my name is Vinayak Dave, and I'm in this industry for about 30 plus years. Like Malcolm said, basically came through the ranks and worked as application programmer, and worked as a database administrator, probably about 12 to 15 years, working with Informix and DB2 databases. And then I got curious about the big data space. So about 5 or 6 years ago, I got into the Hadoop big data space, and help configure and design many solutions for large corporations, with the big data technologies. And last 5 years, I'm pretty much concentrating on the data integration, CDC replication, and ETL toolings that currently Qualum offers as a one-stop all three solutions into the ETL streaming, ELT streaming, and the CDC replication. So basically, to kind of take a step further to what Malcolm said, right, about don't break something, right? If it's working, let's not touch it. But see, I would flip that argument and say you may not even have the option of not doing anything, because oftentimes management has given certain kind of mandates saying we need this new dashboards or this new analytics type application or reporting or machine learning, whatever the new improvement they need. Now, if you say I don't want to do anything, meaning you want to use your current OLTP system and put the load on it, so that's also going to break what's already working. So I think the safest thing to do would be to have a new way of pipelining or creating source of data and pick up the changes from your current OLTP systems at a very minimum non-invasive way, and capture the changes and stream it to whatever fancies your particular organization. So whether you want to take the data to cloud or on-premise target, whatever it may be. So I think that's something you need to do regardless whether you want to break something or not. That's really not the main point here.
Yeah, well, let's get back to this whole concept of dissolving hurdles. They say in the sales process, you have to anticipate the reasons not to buy and then have an explanation for that. And I think that's kind of what we're talking about in this whole domain of optimizing business. So digital transformation, we hear about it all the time these days, and it's really happening now because of COVID as the ultimate forcing function. Lots of organizations had to roll up their sleeves and do the projects they've talked about doing for years. I say all the time, we had a CDO from Novant Health, Carl Hightower, on here last year, who said that at Novant Health, they tackled 5 years of digital transformation in 5 months, right? Because they had to, they were forced to pay attention. And so to me, what's exciting about this concept of no excuses, because you can solve this with a data integration platform, one that scales out. I think that the key is now going to be evangelizing that, and that's Vinayak's job as the evangelist, evangelizing what's possible and helping people understand you have to change your own mind, your old mindset about what's not possible, and realize that it is possible now. And that's just the first step, because I think you're going to see a lot of people kind of coming out of the woodwork, realizing, wow, we can actually solve that now. I've been wanting to do this for 5 years now. I think lots of people listen to this and realize, hey, a lot of times you do just have a data challenge. If you can get over that data challenge, you get over the production challenge, and you're off to something new and exciting. What do you think about that, Vinaya?
Yeah, so I think you said it rightly. So basically picking the solution that scales at a cost, and especially for the business side, which is risk averse, and rightly so. They don't want to break anything, and their main two goals, right? I want to reduce the cost, and I want to basically improve the quality of service for our customer base. And you can do both while reducing the cost, meaning what? You are going to have a less number of people maintaining and developing the solutions, because you are buying something that works out of the box. So that's reducing the cost. You have a less manpower, less hardware, and you are really not paying multiple like a licensing fee for disparate solutions that you currently have. It's under one roof. You are achieving all three goals: enterprise type scalability with CDC replication, ELT streaming, and ETL streaming. So with that, you pretty much have non-risky solution, and you can also future-proof, right? So for example, if you start out with a particular scenario where you want to take the data from, let's say, Oracle to Snowflake, just to start out with, but tomorrow your use case changes. So now if you are doing it in-house, you have to do the whole development process again. It takes months and months of multiple teams to develop the solution. Here, all you have to do is just define your sources and targets, make some configuration changes, and you are up and running within a matter of day or so. So I mean, that's the scalability, right? Not just the data scalability, but the process improvement and the time to market is very critical.
Yeah, no, that's right. I'll throw it back over to Malcolm. I saw you smiling there, so I think you were in agreement with what he was saying. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think Vinayak's pointed out, a few things there, basic principles I would agree with, and I think we need them for this decade. One is like the data platforms are incorporating what were formerly different tool sets. So we're getting them all together in one product, as it were, one offering. So I think that's very, very appealing. And, it helps everybody when you don't have to coordinate different tool sets. Another that I find very intriguing is this prominence of change data capture of CDC. One of the things that will be happening over the next few years is, especially with the onshoring of manufacturing, with the supply chain issues that I think started with COVID, but now seem to be kind of spiraling out of control. We'll onshore manufacturing and service industry too, with the increased use of automation. So if we have, fast food joints where the kitchen is something that fits in the container and there's no humans in there, and it's, pumping out the burgers or the chicken sandwiches or whatever, that's going to throw off a lot of data in terms of control system data, which, I've always worked in it, pretty much always in information systems, but I think we're going to see this fusion of control system data and into information systems for predictive analytics, for logistics around supplying these, let's say, fast food joints. And I think the only way you're going to achieve that at scale is with CDC, like Vinayak was describing. So I think that's incredibly important, and it would give, it will enable us to have those analytics. And then thirdly, it's real time. We're not talking about batch anymore.
Right.
Let's collect all the information, and then in 48 hours from now, I can answer the problem that occurred 5 minutes ago. That's not good.
Timing is everything, right?
It's increasingly everything. Yeah.
Talking to a couple of experts here. My good buddy Malcolm Chisholm from Data Millennium. I love that new title you're throwing out there, the new company name, I guess. And Vinayak Dave from Equilum. Really cool stuff. We're talking about data integration at scale, quite frankly. And there's this whole new generation of technologies that are coming onto the market. And we can thank the cloud, right? Remember that joke, the cloud? Isn't it just someone else's computer? Like, yeah, kind of, but it's someone else's freaking big honking supercomputer. That's what it is. And the more you leverage the capability of these vendors, the better off you're going to be. And, the three old men on the show today have been around long enough to know that we've been working on these problems for years. I mean, back in like the late 1990s, the open source community was very intently focused on elasticity. Like, how do you enable elasticity for peak times of the year or of the day or whatever the case may be? Well, way back when, in ancient times, in the mainframe, you would just have to get as much capacity as you would need on your best day, on your busiest day, and you'd have to pay for that capacity all the time. I guess way back in the day, you kind of rented it. But the point is, now with these cloud-based architectures, you can leverage tremendous power to solve these problems that simply could not have been solved 5 years ago. So that's not that long. I mean, 5 years ago was what, 2016, basically? It's not that long ago, but things have changed that much. And I'll throw it over to Vinayak real quick to kind of comment on that. Do you find that you do spend a lot of time educating people, because the end users are always going to be the sort of laggards, if you will, in terms of technological adoption for all kinds of reasons, because there's no budget, because there's no appetite to change, whatever the case may be. But do you find that you're still having to sort of remind people about what's possible today and therefore what they kind of should be looking into doing? What do you think, Vinayak?
Yeah, so I mean, that's a very good point. And, again, there are a number of reasons why there is some sort of like resistance to change, right? It's not always about technology. I mean, technology is one piece, right? They don't want to sometimes try something new if it's already working fine and it meets the current needs. Sometimes it may be more personal, right? They may be afraid of letting that, that their turf go, right? Because they don't want to have the data going out of their databases, which they are currently, maintaining and kind of caring and feeding for. So there are various angles of why there could be a resistance to change. From the management angle, there could be somewhat of like a delay or like execution or deployment challenges. So for example, right, like you said, 5 years ago I used to work at Hortonworks, and just to have a initial sandbox cluster deployed of, let's say, 10 nodes of Linux bare metal machines, it requires a lead time of maybe like 2 months. I mean, I'm not kidding. It used to really take that long just to have the machines deployed and OS installed. That's all.
Right.
So now these days, if you flip that and look at it, I mean, we can literally spin up just the sandbox or POC cluster, 3 nodes, 5 nodes, 10 nodes, whatever cluster, within minutes. And after that, we can install and configure our product within, like, let's say, an hour or two, and you have up and running complete full environments. So, I mean, there is an argument for doing something and proving out your point and make sure the technology works for you and you have chosen the right, platform. It's all, good, and in terms of the challenges from the personal side of it, right? I mean, I would say that, like, if you really pick the right platform that doesn't impact your current OLTP type platforms, it actually makes your job easier, because otherwise you will continue to try to vertically scale the platform, and there is only so much you can do. That's the whole reason Hadoop came into existence, right? Because people want to do horizontal scaling. So I mean, there are solutions that you can choose for the right reason that will make the business happy, and your job also becomes much easier with it.
Yeah, and we did a webinar with Qualum maybe a month ago or so. It was a fantastic event. You can find it on insideanalysis.com. Watch the replay there. But we were discussing a metaphor to data movement in the agricultural space. And this is great for you, Malcolm, because you've got this whole concept of farm to market MDM. And just for our audience sake, MDM stands for Master Data Management. Master data is the data about the data, basically. And MDM is a great way to virtually reconcile systems, because you're never going to get everything into one database. That's just never, ever, ever going to happen. So you have lots of databases, and you need a way to virtually reconcile them. And that's typically called MDM. But when you think about the agricultural metaphor here and farming, well, if you got a guy out there with a yak trying to just do one line at a time, it's going to take him years to do a giant field. But if you look at the industry these days, they have these tremendously powerful machines that are just huge and do industrial grade farming. Well, you're not going to win doing manual processes against someone who's doing industrial grade automation. You're just going to lose. And you have to kind of align yourself accordingly. But I see that as a very powerful metaphor to describe the difference between the old way of doing things and the new way of doing things. But what do you think about that, Malcolm?
Well, I think that's true. I mean, it is true, actually. I think I've lost track of the statistics, but for a long time I did keep an eye on how many acres of land an individual person could farm in the US, and just be going up and up and up over time. So I think that's a great metaphor for what we're doing in terms of the scale that's involved. And I think it's leading in a number of different directions. And again, coming back to the idea of the data platform supporting all of this. So I think that again, Vinayak has spoken about the resistance that you meet, might be in IT, might be in the business. But I think at the same time, what's happening is that we're getting the ability to democratize data as well, because it's getting taken from these systems and made available in environments that are more easy, I think, for end users to access, to do their analyses, not just the specialized teams of either maybe BI insights people or data scientists. So I think that's a very big plus in terms of enablement that's going to come out of this. Now, how that's going to work out is a different matter. Everybody is kind of overworked, busy, frazzled these days. Do our end users who are SMEs have the time to do this? What about the tools they have to learn and things like that? Although they're getting easier and cheaper and more available too. So I think the general trend is going to be in that direction. democratization of data probably is coming in some way, shape, or form. And businesses are, again, I think Vinayak said that the bosses, the CEOs, the CFOs, etc., are going to want us workers to use that. It's going to happen. So I think that's another development that comes out of this on top of the data platforms.
Yeah, and I'll throw this one over at you, Vinayak, as I think about it. We had a question from an audience member asking, what can we do today that we couldn't do 5 years ago? And I'll just give an example off the top of my head of something that probably could be done. And Malcolm has already hinted at it. You've hinted at it, real-time data delivery. Well, if beforehand you were not able to track all the activity on your website and then deliver that to a call center, well, that was a big gap. But if you have a data integration platform in place that can capture all that data from your clicks, from mapping it to URLs of who's actually on your site now, especially logged in users and what they're doing, if you can patch that through to your call center in real time, then you're going to have a vastly better customer experience when the person picks up the phone to call. Because of it, okay, I see you're trying to buy this product right now. Is that what you're calling? Yes, it is. Oh, wow. Someone's paying attention. They actually know what I want. Can you imagine? Like that, to me, that's a perfect example of how you can optimize the business in a data provisioning way that's going to have tremendous value to keep customers happy, to sell more product and all that fun stuff. What do you think, Vinayak?
Yeah, no, I think Malcolm touched upon a couple of things that actually plays into the strengths of platforms like Equalum. So, for example, for near real-time streaming, situation, actually that is the main reason Equalum exists. To basically capture those solutions and kind of install our product in a way that the customers who are really looking for that speed and agility is where we actually shine. And another thing he kind of pointed out was you don't really have to be technical to use this product. So more like a self-serving kind of situation. So the end users may not have to know the SQL or the actual query language or some other thing. So again, that is one of the hallmark of our platform, where you simply drag and drop the ETL functionality and build your workflow in a very intuitive way. So again, we have customers like, for example, GSK that our CEO mentions many times, is actually using currently that self-serve functionality of the tool, and many of those non-technical people are using the tool very efficiently and at a great speed. Again, it doesn't take too long to build your pipeline. And just to piggyback on that same 2 points, right? Again, coming from the management side, they want to have risk-averse type, mindset, right? So basically, they don't want to make solutions too complicated. Again, that's where we shine, because we have an ease of use. The user interface is modern, very intuitive, and you can pretty much get up and running with it like in no time at all. So I think all those factors are very valuable indeed.
Yeah, and I'll bring Malcolm in to comment on that. This also is sort of adjacent to or connected to, I suppose, another big movement in the enterprise technology space, which is low code, no code, right? In the old days, you would have to hack out some ETL code to pull data from one place to another. And what you had was, over time, just this stack of scripts that are pulling data from A, sending it to M, pulling it from B, sending it to D, pulling it from C, all over the place, but all manually written. And so you didn't have this visual interface to even look and see what's going on in there. And this happened, I'm talking, for decades. These scripts build up, and it's almost like a Jenga tower. You build it high enough, it's just going to fall over. And I think that's what started to happen. But my point here being that with the power, again, of low code, no code, we're getting much better at being able to let business people step in. And that's great news, because they know the processes. The business person who's on the front lines, the head of that LOB, that line of business, they know what needs to happen. And so if you can get them in the process actually doing it, I mean, that's just better for everybody.